Ben Coleman, Maiden speech.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for calling me, and it's a great honour for me to follow my honourable friend for Birmingham Edgbaston, to hear her passion about the NHS and her great expertise in the area, and to follow the honourable member for Wimbledon talking about the joys of canvassing, which I hope you found interesting. And also really, really lovely to hear so many other fantastic maiden speeches from my colleagues here, my honourable friends this side of the House. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm incredibly proud to be standing here as the first ever Labour Member of Parliament for Chelsea and Fulham. And I thank hugely all those voters who put their trust in me. I mean, I realise that wasn't everyone, with a majority of 152, you do realise that. But I also realise that there'll be many people as well who voted Labour for the first time, and I promise to be on the side of all my constituents. Madam Deputy Speaker, boundary changes mean that I follow in the illustrious steps of two people. My Conservative predecessor, Greg Hands, served 19 years in this House. He was 11 of those, he was a minister, and he held senior roles at the Treasury and Trade and Business, and he was twice Minister for London, and he was also, if you recall, the chair of the Conservative Party at one point. And he approached this job, he approached all his jobs, I thought, with an impressive energy and determination and loyalty to his party, and I know he will be missed by many of his constituents. I'm also delighted to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for the new constituency of Hammersmith and Chiswick, two of whose former wards I get. I'm extremely grateful for his generosity to me both during the campaign and since. He is an absolute local legend with voters. Plenty of people said, well, I'm going to vote Labour, but it has to be Andy, not you. But I'm going to try very hard, and maybe I'll fail, I'm going to try very hard to live up to the local legend and the challenge and the high standards that he set. You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, Chelsea and Fulham really is a wonderful place to represent. It runs along, for those who don't know it, it runs along the River Thames from just by Charing Cross Hospital down to Chelsea Bridge. That's 3 bridges away from this house, if any of you want to go and visit it. And a walk of less than an hour takes you from the 150-year-old market in Fulham's North End Road to the world-famous King's Road in Chelsea, with, you know, its iconic role in pop and art and fashion culture and the swinging 60s and the punks and the new romantics of the 70s and 80s. There are also 4 world-class hospitals. We're incredibly lucky. We have the Royal Brompton, we have the Royal Marston, we have Chelsea, the Charing Cross, I should say, and we have the Chelsea and Westminster hospitals. There are too many outstanding schools across the primary and secondary sectors to name, and we're also blessed with 2 Premier League teams, Chelsea Football Club and Fulham, both of them steeped in sporting history. And like so much of London, Chelsea and Fulham is enriched by a diverse community. We have people from African Caribbean, Somali, Arab, European backgrounds. Indeed, the French MP for Northern Europe, and yes, there is a French MP for Northern Europe, told me that 2/3 of all the French in this country live in my area and the area represented by the honourable member friend for Kensington and Bayswater. So it's quite a French area as well. And Chelsea and Fulham is also home to hundreds of army veterans who've sacrificed for their country, from the residents of Stoll Mansions in Fulham to the Chelsea pensioners at the Royal Hospital. And indeed, I have to say that championing the Stoll military veterans as they faced losing their community recently was absolutely one of my greatest privileges. And I'm very grateful to the Secretary of State for Defence for visiting them with me and for lending his support to the campaign. And I know how many of the veterans will be delighted that he now represents veterans in Cabinet. And I hope he'll visit them again when they move to their new home in Fulham. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, Fulham, together with Hammersmith, has the distinction of being the only place in England where the council, a Labour council, provides social care at home for free. I was responsible for overseeing that as the Council's former Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Social Care, and I look forward very much to joining the debate about the funding of social care across our country. But against all this, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm afraid there is trouble in paradise. Alongside the great wealth in Chelsea and Fulham, there is also painful poverty. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am to all the local charities who provide essential support to the many people in need. And food banks have been mentioned by several of the honourable members on both sides of this House during today's debate. And for me, if anything is an indictment of the past 14 years. It's that food banks have become part of the British way of life. And the food bank that serves Fulham feeds today more people in 1 month than it did in the whole of 2012 when it started. And the food bank that serves Chelsea, demand for that has gone up by 800% since it opened its doors in 2018. People are using food banks who are in work, children and pensioners, the demand is growing for them. And of course, poverty, locally and nationally, is made much worse by the persistent inequalities both in Chelsea and Fulham and across our country, not least of race and disability. And these are also issues I feel very passionate about and will be pursuing in my time here in this House. And then we have Charing Cross Hospital, a wonderful hospital, and I'm really very proud of having helped to save the hospital when the previous government tried to sell most of it off. But at the time, they promised to give it a floor-by-floor refurbishment. It desperately needs modernisation and rebuilding. They promised to do so by 2030, but then they broke their promise. Other problems facing my constituents are that Thames Water constantly dumps sewage into the Thames by Chelsea and Fulham. Nearly 24 hours last week alone, just chucking the stuff in. No regulation over the last 14 years, no proper controls. And also there's a wonderful houseboat community down by Chelsea, down by the river. That is facing an existential threat from a predatory, secretive landlord. And I will be doing more to stick up for them as well. Then we get the King's Road. I've mentioned the King's Road. The residents there are very worried about the huge office blocks spoiling the area. Marks & Spencer seems to have become a property developer, not just a purveyor of sausages and sandwiches and underwear these days. And my constituents are worried about crime, they're worried about the lack of neighbourhood policing, high prices and rents are pushing families and young people out of the area. And as it's been so incredibly difficult to build social housing over the past 14 years, thousands of my constituents are living in overcrowded conditions, or they're waiting years to be offered a secure, genuinely affordable home. This is all in Chelsea and Fulham. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, however, against that, the good news for my constituents is that we now have a Labour government. Determined, thank goodness, to renew the country. And we have a new approach. We are focusing on growing our economy. We are, thank goodness, resetting our European relationships, something that is very much welcomed, I think, by my constituents, one of the strongest pro-European constituencies in the country. Other good news is that my Right Honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, has already pledged to rebuild and modernise Charing Cross Hospital. We, in the government has already started cracking down on the water companies. It's starting to develop a new child poverty strategy and started to take back our streets, which is already referred to by my honourable friend for Birmingham and Erdington, and my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, set out the steps that we're taking so well earlier today. Of course, if you rent privately, you're going to get new rights, you're going to get new protection from this government, and we're going to be building the 1.5 million decent homes in this country that people can actually afford to live in. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, as this government begins its journey of repairing and rebuilding our country, I come back to the words of a good friend of mine, who's Phil Story, who runs the food bank that serves Phil at Fulham. And Phil said to me the other day, he said, you know, we want to stop people ever needing food banks. He said, the day we can close our doors because we're no longer needed is the day I dream of. And so to my constituents, I make this pledge. As the Member of Parliament for Chelsea and Fulham, working with the Labour government, I will do all I can to strengthen our economy, to build a fairer, a safer and a kinder society, and to bring that dream of Phil's closer to reality. Thank you.